That's right. In case you don't know, you're supposed to do as Shelley tells you to do. It's taken me a few months to figure that out, but I got it down.
I got to take a let JP first now.
Okay.
I need to just make you a little black mark. This is JP's mark.
Yeah. Hopefully, I only have one more speech to give this week, so this afternoon. Yeah. It's okay. You know, when the hot button items here is fisheries management, and there's a lot of pressure coming from there. I mean, we're going to see this in Washington. We're going to try to.
That went into organizing this visit, and I very much enjoyed my time here so far, and learning about the Sea Lab has been great. So this visit was sponsored through the EPSCOR program at NSF, and I'll talk about, in the second half of my talk will be about EPSCOR, a little bit more about EPSCOR, but my goal today is not to tell you everything that there is to know about NSF. I'm going to keep my talk fairly short, and because I want to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So I'm going to talk in the first, I only have about 20 slides. The first 10 or so are just about NSF in general, the structure of NSF, because I think can be a pretty confusing organization if you're not intimately familiar with it, and some of the types of grant programs that are available for people to apply to at NSF at all levels, from grad students, postdocs, and PIs, and groups of PIs. And then the second half of the talk will be about EPSCOR, the EPSCOR program, in particular how the state of Alabama relates to the EPSCOR program, and what kind of opportunities are available through that program. And if any of you would like a copy of this presentation, just send me an email, and I'd be happy to send it to anyone who asks for it. Okay, so NSF, the National Science Foundation, is the flagship basic research funding agency in the federal government. It's an independent federal agency, which means it's not part of one of the cabinets in the federal government. It reports to the president. If you go up far enough up the chain of command, it's directly under the President of the United States. And so NSF has been around since 1950, and it was established through legislative act in 1950. And you can see the strategic goals and the types of things that NSF is trying to perform: transforming frontiers, innovation, and performing as a model organization is something that NSF takes very seriously and is very proud of the fact that it's seen as one of the models for a research organization in the federal government. The budget for NSF right now is about $7.5 billion. They requested $8 billion in 2017. That we don't have the budget passed yet by Congress, so that we don't have a budget for this year yet. But that was the request. We're proud of the fact that 93% of the funding that comes to NSF goes directly to support research. So there's not very much not a very big proportion of the funds are used for administrative salaries and things like that. And you can see the numbers: 50,000 proposals a year, 12,000 awards. So it's a big enterprise, supports research across disciplines, just about all disciplines in science. So I have a few slides just on sort of the structure of NSF, because I think this is where it can get really confusing if you're not really familiar with it. So NSF is divided into the science part of NSF, the part that supports the research, is divided into these 7 directorates. And so within each of these directorates are divisions. And so within the biological sciences directorate, which is the one that I'm in, so I'll use that as the example, there are 5 divisions. So we have Integrative Organismal Systems, which is the division I'm in, Molecular Cellular Biology, Environmental Biology, Biological Infrastructure, and Emerging Frontiers are more sort of specialized. Most of the research grants that you would submit would go to one of the top 3. They're the Integrative Organismal Systems, MCB, and DEB. And then Emerging Frontiers is sort of for special topics. But this is where it starts to get confusing, because once you get within a division and you're trying to figure out where do I submit a proposal, which program should I submit to, there are these clusters. So within each division at NSF you have clusters and they're basically clusters of programs. So for example, within my division, iOS, we have behavioral systems, developmental systems, neural systems, and then physiological and structural systems. And then within each of those clusters are the individual programs that you actually would submit your proposal to. So for example, within the PSS cluster, we have these four different actual programs. So this is where it can get confusing, because they have these layers of different things. You have to sort of figure out where is the best place to submit my proposal. And when you have to keep following the chain down to the fact until you get to the individual programs, and then start to think about which program, read the descriptions online of the different programs, what kind of research they're interested in, and get some ideas about where your proposal would fit best. So it does take some work to figure out which type of program should I submit to. So the process of submitting a proposal, the number one thing that I would like you to get out of this talk is that we as program directors really encourage you to contact us and talk to us about your ideas for proposals as you're starting to develop ideas. And then also, if you have questions during the proposal preparation process, and then after the reviews come back, if your proposal wasn't awarded, to talk to us about, what are those things that could be done to improve the proposal. So I think a lot of people, feel intimidated or don't feel like they don't want to bother the program directors because they're busy, which is true. We are very busy, but we really are there to serve you, the scientific community. So we really like to talk to you, and we really invite people to contact us early in the process to help, number one, to help you figure out which of those myriad of programs your ideas would best fit in. And then also we can kind of give you advice about what types of ideas that the program is interested in and things like that. So don't be afraid to send us emails. Just cold calling usually doesn't work very well, but if you send us an email, set up a time to talk on the phone, we're happy to do that. As far as the mechanics of submitting proposals, there are instructions in guides you can find online. There's going to be a new version going into effect in January. But then, so you have to, that's sort of the master guide that you have to follow. But then there's also in each program or each division that you're submitting to, usually they have specific solicitations where they have their own instructions, which you also have to follow. So for example, in the iOS program, we have a core program solicitation for 2017 called NSF 17-508. And so if you look in that solicitation, it talks about what are the required elements in a proposal, what forms do you need to fill out, et cetera. And then you have to refer to the program or to the proposal guide as sort of the overall, giving the overall instructions. But in places where they differ, the program, the individual solicitations take precedence over the guide if they differ. So you have to pay attention to both of those things. So in addition, all of the divisions, all the programs have these core solicitations. That's sort of the normal route that you would submit a proposal. But in addition to that, there are additional opportunities that come up at various times. So it's one of our jobs as program directors is to kind of keep our eye on the fields and where they're going and sort of see areas where there might be need, so we can formulate new solicitations for specialized topics to, say, invite proposals on a certain topic. It might be just a one-time thing, or it might be just a few years, but so these things crop up occasionally, and so it's a good idea to check the sites fairly often to see what different solicitations are available, what opportunities are available. If you go to the website for each of the directorates, there's a link to they all have a direct link now to active funding opportunities, and you can search through those and find ones that are relevant to you. So for example, just this last year, there's a program in iOS called the EDGE program, Enabling Discovery Through Genomic Tools, that just started. This was the first round of proposals was just held. And then that's going to go for probably 2 or 3 years maybe, and then it might be over. They don't know yet. They're still going to evaluate where it's at, but that's just an example. Something to keep in mind is that some of the programs, such as in iOS and DEB, do have a pre-proposal system currently in effect, so you have to kind of be aware of what the deadlines are, what the requirements are. So in the pre-proposal deadlines for iOS is in January, coming up in January. DEB is also in January. And so in the pre-proposal system, you have to submit this pre-proposal, and it has to be invited then as a full proposal before you can actually submit a full proposal. So these are the kinds of things that you just have to be aware of and be checking the website fairly frequently, because deadlines change from year to year sometimes and things like that. And this is also something that you can contact us if you have questions about too, and we're happy to help you with that, sorting out all those deadlines. So besides sort of the core proposals, which are the sort of the meat and potatoes of NSF, there are a number of other types of proposals that you can apply for, depending on what stage of a career you're at and what type of research you're doing, what type of institution you're at. So one that's pretty well known are the career proposals. These are proposals for tenure-track faculty who are not yet tenured, so they're in their early stages as they're in assistant professors. Those are pretty prestigious 5-year awards that really help people get started with their career as an academic scientist. So that's something, if you're in that position now or moving into that position in the future, to keep in mind. RUI, Research at Undergraduate Institution proposals. These are proposals for people who are at institutions that are defined as having, I think the definition is they've graduated less than 25 PhDs over the last 2 years. And so primarily undergraduate institutions or master's degree institutions. So those are a specific type of proposal. It's similar to the core proposal, at least in our division. It's the same as the core proposal, but it gets treated a little bit differently because we realize that it's coming from one of these types of institutions. An ROA is called Research Opportunity Awards. This is something else that faculty at smaller undergraduate institutions can apply for, which gives them an opportunity to visit other institutions to get training or to learn techniques, things like that. Eager and rapid proposals are smaller, sort of shorter term proposals, usually 2 years, up to $300,000, which are, the eager proposals are meant for innovative and high risk, high reward research. So one of the things that NSF, like most funding agencies, gets criticized for sometimes is that they don't fund enough risky research. Reviewers tend to gravitate towards the things that are more sure bets. But the eager mechanism is a way to try to fund things that wouldn't be, they're too risky to go through the normal channels of a proposal review, and so they get reviewed in-house just within, by the program officers and awarded based on available funds and you know, the quality of the ideas, obviously, and the impact that it could have. Rapid proposals is a similar thing. This is meant to take advantage of things that are sort of happening in a time-limited fashion. So, for example, like the Zika epidemic last year, there was a call that went out for proposals on Zika, or you know, if there's some kind of emergency situation, natural disaster, things like that, that you can only do the research at that time. You can't wait and do it later. That's what the rapids are meant to support. Research coordination network proposals are groups of investigators who want to get together and talk about the best way to move a field forward. And so those are really, they're not really so much supporting research, but more supporting the ability of these people just to meet and talk about research and the direction the field will go, things like that. Conference proposals, we support a lot of conferences. We help support workshops and conferences. Graduate research fellowships. So NSF is really big in graduate research fellowships. They get about 15,000 applications a year for research fellowships. These are PhD fellowships. They have to be applied for during the first year of your PhD, either right when you start the first year or as you're just starting the second year is the limitation. And so if you are planning to go to graduate school and into a PhD program, this is something to think about applying for. NSF puts a lot more resources currently into graduate fellowships than they do into postdoctoral fellowships. So they've made a strategic decision to focus more on the graduate fellowships. But there are some opportunities for postdoctoral fellowships, a few limited ones. Within bio, we offer postdoctoral research fellowships only to a few groups, so underrepresented groups or people who are doing research with biological collections or plant genomics can apply for postdoctoral fellowships. These doctoral dissertation improvement grants, I forgot to mention also, if you are already a PhD student and you're nearing the end of your PhD, you can apply for this to give you some supplemental funding to help you finish your dissertation research. Again, those are somewhat limited in their opportunities. So within bio, we only accept them in the behavioral systems cluster, and in the Division of Environmental Biology, DEB, they accept those proposals. Okay, if you've submitted proposals to NSF before, you're familiar with the two main review criteria that are used, the intellectual merit and the broader impacts. And so every proposal has to address these two types of criteria. You can see listed here the sort of things that reviewers are asked to evaluate when they're evaluating proposals. They're asked to evaluate these types of questions about both intellectual merit and broader impacts. I think intellectual merit is pretty straightforward. That's easy to understand. How novel is the research? How qualified are the investigators? What's the likelihood of success, et cetera? Do they have the facilities to carry out the research? Broader impacts is a little bit harder to understand exactly what that means. And so broader impacts is meant to be things that will benefit society or advance societal outcomes. And NSF deliberately leaves this as being fairly vague because they want the scientific community to define what is a desirable broader impact, rather than NSF from the top down determining these are what are going to be our broader impacts. So broader impacts are very broad. It includes anything that can benefit the country economically. It can include any, so for example, benefits to agriculture, benefits to medicine, benefits to industry, things that would impact a research field positively, not just your immediate field, but larger field is seen as a broader impact. And then a lot of people now, or basically everyone now, also includes some educational or outreach component in their broader impact plans for a proposal. So something along the line, training students in the lab is good. That's not enough anymore. Now people want you to do more than just what you would normally be doing with, training students. So that's good, but then usually you have to sort of go above and beyond that a little bit by proposing, broadening participation is a big part of it, so recruiting underrepresented groups into the research, and outreach programs with high schools and K through 12 education is proposed a lot. So those kinds of things are what people are basically proposing in what they're asking when they're asking for money. So if any of you have questions about that at the end, I'd be happy to talk about that a little bit more, because that's a big question that comes up a lot. So one of the things that you can do as an investigator is to review proposals. It's a really great opportunity to see how the process works from the inside and see what makes a successful proposal. So especially if you're just beginning, if you're just starting out your career, we like to have a mix of junior and senior PIs on the panels and as reviewers. So we don't only choose the established people in the field, we like to have both. You don't have to be a US citizen or even living within the US to serve on a panel or to be what we call an ad hoc reviewer, which is someone who just reviews one proposal and sends in a review. We have a lot of reviewers especially ad hoc reviewers from Europe and Canada and things like that. We have some panelists that we bring in from Canada. We usually don't bring in panelists from further away just because of cost considerations. But I highly recommend that you get involved in the review process. We also get some ad hoc reviews from postdocs too. So if you're a postdoc and you would like to be involved in reviewing proposals, that's possible. So the best thing to do is to contact the program director that's relevant to the program that you're interested in, that your research applies to. A good time to contact them is maybe just after the proposal deadline, because that's about the time that they're looking at the proposals that have come in and they're starting to think about who do I need to get reviews from to be able to review these proposals. So that's a good time to contact them, just let them know that you'd be interested in serving either as an ad hoc reviewer or as a panelist. And then the Rotator program. So I'm at NSF now I'm going to end up being there about a year and a half. So about a third to a half of the program directors at NSF are people like me who come from academia or other organizations and serve as a program director for a year or two at NSF. It's a really great opportunity. If this is something that you're interested in at all, I highly recommend that you look into it. You're treated the same as the permanent program directors at NSF. You have the same responsibilities. You run a program. You help manage the review of the proposals. And it's just many, many benefits that get from this. It's really been a great experience for me, and I've really enjoyed it a lot. So if you're interested at all in that, there's a website you can go to that has information about it, and there's always demand for more rotators, so it's something to think about. Okay, the second half, or a little less than half, I'm going to talk about the EPSCOR program a little bit because I was asked by Kim to talk about it, and I think it's something that I'm also from an EPSCOR state, being in Kansas. And so it's definitely something that is something to take advantage of. It's really a plus for the states that are eligible. So EPSCOR stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. And I just heard that they're proposing to change this from experimental to established program because it's been around now for about 20 years. So it's not very experimental anymore. I think they think it's really working well, and so they want to keep doing it. So what is EPSCOR? So EPSCOR was founded in order to address concerns that too much of the research dollars were going to just to certain parts of the country, certain states, and other parts of the country were being left behind. And so NSF started this program to basically try to develop research capabilities in other areas of the country to make sure that we don't end up with just a few centers of excellence and the rest of the country not being able to contribute. And so you can see the goals here. I'm not going to read through them, but obviously they want to strengthen the infrastructure, build up the research capabilities in those jurisdictions, broaden participation, etc., impact research and education, and also economic development is a big part of it. So these are the current EPSCOR jurisdictions at NSF. The eligibility is based on having received less than 0.75% of the NSF research budget over the past 3 years. So this is done on a statewide basis, either states or territories. And you can see the list here of all of the states that are part of it and when they were admitted into the EPSCOR program. So it is a pretty large number of states that can participate in this program. So what does EPSCOR do? It tries to build partnerships throughout that jurisdiction. So they use the word jurisdiction because it's not only states, there's also some territories, so it's states or territories. But they're trying, the goal is to not just have a few people running an EPSCOR program, but to make it a partnership between the federal government, the state government, private sector within each of these jurisdictions. Each one has a steering committee, and each jurisdiction comes up with a science and technology plan where they emphasize what are the areas of science and technology that they think are important for their particular jurisdiction and how they can move their jurisdiction forward. So the EPSCOR program within a state needs to align with that science and technology plan. And they try to use a multifaceted approach to improving infrastructure. So in Alabama, I did a little bit of research before I came. So the Alabama State Steering Committee, the chair is Lynn Chronister, your vice president for research at the University of South Alabama. The Science and Technology Plan is available on the website of the NSF WebScore page for the Alabama EPSCOR page. So you can look through that. There's a brief summary. You can kind of get an idea of what kinds of things they emphasize. It's pretty broad, as you would expect. It's not just focused on a couple of areas. There's a lot of components to that plan. As we'll see in a minute, there's something called a research infrastructure improvement tracks. There's different tracks, types of proposals that you can apply for. The biggest one is Track 1. Each state has a single Track 1 award, and those go for 5 years. And those have to align with this plan, obviously. So the one that's currently in effect here in Alabama is called Nano/Bio Science and Sensors. So that's the 5-year plan in Alabama. And I believe it just got renewed, right? Yeah. So it's going to go for another 5 years. So you can think about if your research aligns with the science and technology plan, the overall one. I bet it probably does, no matter what you do, because it's pretty broad. But think about if you're a senior faculty member and you want to think about maybe coming up with the next 5-year plan after this one is expired. You can start thinking about the process of how those are selected. You can find, I don't know this, but you can find out if seed funding and emerging opportunities are possible through that program. The director of the Track 1 program currently is Mahesh Osir at Tuskegee University. And I'm sure he'd be happy if you contacted him with questions. So like I said, there's these 4 tracks within the EPSCOR program. Track 1 are these large grants for up to $4 million a year for 5 years. And they're statewide. They're meant to build the research throughout the state in whatever that theme is of that proposal or award. Track 2 proposals are meant to be collaborations between jurisdictions or between states and focused mainly on developing early career investigators. So these are awards that can be, you can apply for these as a PI. You need a team, obviously. You need a team of people, in this case, not only in Alabama, but in another state as well that you team up with, and you come up with an idea for a project, big project, and you can submit those. Track 3 started in fiscal year 13. These are awards that are meant to focus on broadening participation. Yes, question?
So for track 2, do you have to partner up with another EPSCOR state, or can it be any state?
It has to be another EPSCOR state, I'm pretty sure, yeah. Yep, good question. The track 3 are focused on broadening participation, so grant awards that are researching better ways to broaden participation. And then track 4 is the one that just started. It's new. It's just starting right now. The first deadline is coming up in a couple of months. This is for workforce development, up to $300,000 for 2 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that since that's the newest one. So this track 4 is meant for non-tenured faculty members. So it can be soft money, non-tenured track, or it can be tenured track, people who are not yet tenured. Those are the people who are eligible to apply for this. Obviously, they have to be in an EPSCOR jurisdiction. And basically what it is that they apply for funds to allow them to make extended visits to other institutions in order to learn new techniques, or learn, partner with other organizations, things like that, set up collaborations. So you don't have to go to another EPSCOR state. You can go anywhere in the U.S. You can go to a university. You can go to a government research lab. That's what this type of award is meant to be. They anticipate only making 10 awards, but anyone non-tenured faculty can apply. There's only 3 proposals allowed per institution, so I think each institution probably has a set of guidelines in effect for how to, so each people within that institution will need to sort of be screened first, and then they'll choose 3 that they're going to be allowed to apply. So that's probably already well into the works at this point, because the proposals are due at the end of February. Do you know, Kim, where it's at right now? Okay. Okay, so 3 slots are still open. Okay. So contact Kim if you're interested in learning more and trying to apply for one of those slots. It does have to be faculty members, so postdocs are not eligible. They have to have a faculty appointment, I believe. Another question, yeah.
In these other categories of the EPSCOR, do they all have to fit under that sort of nanobio/sensor sort of overall theme of the EPSCOR?
I'm pretty sure they would need to, yeah, within the jurisdiction that you're in, yeah. Yep. But again, if you read that plan, it's very broad, so it includes a lot of different areas of research. So EPSCOR, in addition to funding these types of proposals, these track 1, 2, 3, and 4 proposals, it also tries to build infrastructure through supporting workshops and outreach visits, such as the one that I'm on today. So you can apply to EPSCOR for conference or workshop funds to hold a conference or a workshop. And also you can apply, as Kim did, or someone did in your office, for someone to come and visit your institution, which is why I'm here today. So these types of opportunities are also available. So this gives you an idea of the level of funding that goes to each of the EPSCOR jurisdictions. No, I'm sorry. This is not the level of funding. Well, this is not the level of EPSCOR funding. This is the level of NSF funds that these jurisdictions bring in from NSF total. So the the hatched bars are their initial 3 years that they were in EPSCOR, and then the orange bars are the most recent one, which in this case is fiscal year 13 through 15. So you can see in most cases that there has been an increase. So it's been successful in most jurisdictions in providing, in helping that jurisdiction earn more NSF funding over time. So Alabama is right here. So you can see that there has been an increase since we first joined the EPSCOR program. This is the threshold, the 0.75% threshold. So this is kind of gives you an idea of where you're at in terms of that threshold and compared to the other jurisdictions. Some of these over here are now graduating out of EPSCOR and are no longer going to be eligible to apply for EPSCOR funding. So that's obviously the goal, is to get everyone up to this level eventually. This gives you an idea of the size of the EPSCOR budget. So the budget is about $165 million per year, at least in 2015, which is about 2.7% of the overall research budget at NSF. And the track 1 proposals take up most of that. Actually, this is all the tracks 1 through 4. The co-funding is something else I didn't mention, but when you submit a proposal, if you're from a EPSCOR state, you submit a proposal that you check that box on your proposal. What that means is that if that proposal is judged as being meritorious, the program officer can go to EPSCOR and say, will you help pay for part of this proposal in order so that I can help me fund it. So it helps stretch the dollars that we have in our individual programs. And so that's the co-funding part, that they will help fund some of the proposals that come through. Yes? Yes, it is. So you have to, as a program manager, you have to identify which are the ones that would be eligible for that, and then go and apply to EPSCOR. They have a series of deadlines throughout the year, and you have to send them some information about the proposal, and then they'll decide which ones they want to support. So it doesn't hurt to remind program officers of that fact, but I think we're all cognizant of it, and we're trying to increase it. We're trying to fund as many of these proposals as we can, so it's definitely something that, at least in my division, we pay a lot of attention to. Yeah, so the question is, do they have a maximum that they'll support, or what kind of percentage do they support? I don't have a good feeling for that yet, but I know they don't support everything that you request. They just don't have the funds to do that. But from what I've heard from other program officers, typically what is advised is that you select one or maybe two at the most that are not the highest ranked proposals in your batch of proposals, but the ones that are sort of closer to the cutoff line where you're going to start making decisions. Those are the ones that they like to try to support, because they want to help additional ones that get funded that wouldn't otherwise get funded. They want to stretch their dollars, obviously. So if it's one that you're going to fund anyway, they're not interested. But if it's one that's on the line and you can say, well, I don't think I'm going to be able to support this one unless I get your help, those are the ones that they are more interested in trying to help with. And from what I've heard, it's a pretty good success rate. I mean, it's not like it's rare that it happens. I think a lot of them do get supported. Not all of them, obviously, but. And then this is just the overall NSF budget by directorate. So here's EPSCOR, and then Bio is here, about $700 million. So Bio is about 10% of the budget of NSF, which is about $7.5 billion. It just gives you an idea of where it is with some of these. Math and physical sciences and geo are big because NSF is basically the only agency that funds a lot of that research, especially the math and physical sciences. So that's going to have a big chunk of the funding. Obviously, Bio gets support from other agencies like USDA and NIH. But this gives you an idea of the dollars that go into each of these directorates. Okay, so just to wrap up, what kind of things can you do as an investigator? Make sure you stay abreast of the funding opportunities. Pay attention to the solicitations that come out. They usually have pretty specific language in them, and so make sure that you follow the instructions very carefully, and communicate with the program officers. Again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is at the beginning of the state of the proposal preparation, when you just have some ideas and you're thinking about developing this into a proposal. What I advise you to do is write it up as a one-page summary with some proposed aims or objectives. Send it to a program director, or maybe more than one. Send it to maybe 3 or 4 programs that might be relevant to what you're thinking about, and just ask them for their feedback on, is this a good fit for your program, and if not, why not? And they can give you some really good pointed advice about how you're going to write your proposal. We don't write the proposals, obviously, for the PIs, but we do want people to not be shooting themselves in the foot by just completely missing the mark either. So if there's something glaring about it that doesn't fit very well with our program, we try to point that out and give them advice about that. We try to make sure that every proposal can find a home somewhere at NSF, because we do want to support all science. So sometimes it's hard. Sometimes there's certain topics that don't quite fit very well in any program, but we still try to make sure that we help those PIs get their research funded in some type of program. When you get your reviews back and it didn't get funded, don't get discouraged. I know it's hard to stay optimistic when you keep getting your proposals sent back to you, but you just have to stay at it. You have to stay optimistic and get the advice of the program officers about, why wasn't this ranked higher? And they'll usually have very good advice for you about what you can do to improve your proposal. Take advantage of, there's a lot of workshops now on grant writing, effective grant proposal writing. Take advantage of those. Take advantage of the fact that you're in an EPSCOR state. It gives you more opportunities than people that aren't in those types of states. Like I said, volunteer to serve as a reviewer. If you have a chance to do a rotation as a program officer, I highly recommend that. If you have any questions about the EPSCOR program, there's Sue Wheeler would be the person to talk to at NSF. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have. Yes. Right, right. So the question was, are infrastructure costs included in those research budgets? And I believe the answer is yes. I believe that those are part of those research budgets. Because if you add all those numbers up, it totals the amount that we have. So you're right. Some types of research, polar research, marine vessel research that requires ship time on marine vessels, do take a lot of resources. So that's another reason why GEO especially has such a large budget, relatively speaking. Yes? I'll let you guys answer that question. The answer is no, it's not. I'm talking to people online that are listening online because they probably can't hear your questions or answers. Yeah.
Well, I actually have a general question. So I get a lot of questions about broader impacts. So I was wondering if you could share some of the more creative types of broader impact statements that maybe you've seen. I know it's very proposal specific, but some of it is generalizable, to give people an idea of where they can actually go.
Yeah.
Their imagination for broader impacts.
So the question is about broader impacts and what are some examples of the types of broader impact proposal or objectives or statements that we see in proposals. So this is something that's very subjective, first off. So it's hard to measure because how do you measure impact? So there are ways to assess impact, but we're not as far along with that as we are with measuring the impact of our science. In general, I would say, my impression is that over the years it's continued to sort of creep further and further up as far as the bar to get over. So first I should give a little bit of historical perspective. So the reason why broader impacts became one of the review criteria in the first place was the director of NSF, this was I think about 12 years ago or something like that, testifying before Congress, was asked, well, you do this research and that's great, but how does it benefit society? And so the response of NSF was to come up with, now all proposals are going to have to address not only what is the intellectual merit, but what is the impact on society, the benefits for society. So that's sort of the idea behind where it started from. I think that's helpful to keep in mind. So initially, I think, people would write that they're going to train their students and publish their work, and that's great, that's impact. And then, the impact of the research on the economically or impact on the field. But over time, because the process of writing proposals is so competitive, and broader impacts can help determine how a proposal is ranked. It's sort of gotten higher and higher. The bar has gotten higher and higher. So now we see it most of the time. Reviewers would not consider just the fact that you're training students and publishing your work would not be enough now for them to say that this is satisfactory. So usually most reviewers want to see that you're doing something over and above just doing the research. So the types of things that we see a lot of outreach with K through 12. We see a lot of high school students being recruited to come and work in the summers in labs. We see a lot of sort of workshops for high school students and younger students. We see a lot of public outreach at museums and things like that. I think the facility you have here would be fantastic for that, and I'm sure people are taking advantage of that, or they should be in their proposals, because that's if you can establish some sort of activity that you can be involved in with that showcases your research, that's the type of thing that people really like to see. Some kind of either educating the public, communicating the importance of your work to the public, or to students, to younger people, and getting them involved in STEM research. Broadening participation is another big part of the broader impacts, so it's always a good idea in your proposal to address how you would help broaden participation of underrepresented groups in the research. And so we see, I see a lot of proposals that are, not a lot, but I see some proposals that partner with historically black colleges, universities, for example, or minority serving institutions, to bring students from those institutions, give them research experiences in the lab, things like that. Some of the really creative ones can kind of get a little bit maybe over the top, but things like coming up with a new app, an iPhone app that sort of like for a game that kids can play based on your research. All this has to tie into your research, right? So whatever broader impact activity you're thinking about, it should be integrated with what the research is, because the whole idea is, how is this research that you're going to do, how is that going to benefit society? So things like iPhone apps, things like citizen science, where you're having the public collect specimens and send them in, and then you analyze them and send them back the results. Webcams that they can tune in and watch your fish swimming around, or things like that. Watch experiments that you're doing. Education is a big part of it too, so educational impact, such as incorporating your research that you're doing into courses that you're teaching, and partnering with K through 12 teachers to help train them. That's something we see a lot of. You bring teachers in to learn to sort of do science, and you work with the teachers to develop modules, educational modules that they can use in their K through 12 classrooms. I think probably the most creative one I've seen is a PI who started a new course based on using teaching students computer programming skills, but then also combining it with better ways to display large data sets. So graphic artists. So he teamed up with an arts professor to start this class, and they have students from the art department and computer science students and science students all working together collaboratively to come up with these new software to display large data sets in ways that help people interpret them better, which I thought was really interesting and cool. So those are some different types of things. We see all kinds of things. It's only limited by your imagination, basically. And reviewers do tend to like creative things where they say, "Oh, that's really cool. I wish I had thought of that." That's always a good thing to get their attention. You don't want to go overboard, though, with broader impacts. It is possible to propose so much that the reviewers say, "Well, when are they going to do the research?" They're going to be spending all their time doing these activities, so that you have to keep in mind these are research grants. We're giving you an award to do the research, but I think there are a lot of benefits to these other things too. You just don't want to go too far with them. Yes.
I was wondering if you have any sense of within NSF how vulnerable NSF is to political changes and how
Yes.
worried we should be over the next. I know there's obviously the total budget
Yeah.
that plays, but in terms of the research priorities, how much autonomy does NSF have?
Okay. So the question is about what is the future going to bring with the budget, and how much autonomy does NSF have in determining research? So these are politically sensitive topics. As a government employee, I have to be careful what I say. With the budget, nobody really knows what's going to happen with the budget at this point. Congress, as of today, needs to pass another continuing resolution to keep the government functioning for into the future. That's going to happen if it hasn't already happened. The word is it's going to probably go through April, and then after that, we don't know what's going to happen, if they're going to pass a budget for 2017 or if they're just going to have the entire fiscal year 2017 be one big continuing resolution and then just reset and start over in 2018. That's maybe what will happen, but we don't know yet at this point. And as far as the level of funding, I think nobody really knows at this point what's going to happen. As far as how autonomous NSF is, NSF has struggled very hard to make sure that it remains as autonomous as possible. And there have been some attempts from Congress to try to have some of the research, have some more say over what types of research are being supported by NSF. So far, those attempts have been pretty much staved off, and NSF really takes great pride in the fact that almost all of the research that's funded by NSF is bottom-up driven. It's things that PIs, investigators, are proposing. It's not NSF imposing things on them saying you will work on this or this or this. It's investigator-driven research, and that's what NSF wants to support and wants to continue supporting. So I think at this point they're still very successful at doing that. Thank you.